For those who were there in New York, Pennsylvania, and DC, we know that getting past is much, much harder to do even a decade later. Allow me to give you a brief history of that day. A series of 4 coordinated suicide attempts were made by Al-Qaeda against the United States. It is known that hijackers intentionally crashed 2 of the airplanes into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City, killing everyone on board and thousands of individuals working in the towers. Both towers collapsed within 2 hours, destroying nearby buildings and damaging others. A 3rd airplane crashed into the Pentagon. Hijackers had redirected the 4th plane toward Washington, D.C., targeting either the Capitol building or the White House, but crashed in the field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania, after passengers attempted to retake control of the airplane. There were no survivors from any of those flights. Nearly 3,000 victims and 19 hijackers died in the attacks. Among the 2,753 victims who died in the attacks on the World Trade Center were 343 firefighters, 60 police officers from New York City and the Port Authority, 8 private emergency medical technicians and paramedics. Another 184 people were killed in the attacks on the Pentagon. The majority of casualties were civilians, including nationals of over 70 countries. Because of the 9/11 attacks, we are different now. Most of us will willingly tolerate long lines at the airports, empty our pockets and remove our shoes, belts, and jackets, sending them through X-ray machines for scrutiny. We open our bags before entering sporting events, theaters, and musical performances. We sometimes gaze with suspicions at young men carrying backpacks on public transportation. There has been many social consequences in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks, some positive, like the increase in charitable donations to support those that were directly affected and the families of the victims. The events of 9/11 have changed many of us in America, society as a whole. I remember being at work in the medical center here in Houston. My manager had tuned in on the local news that was covering this event. It seemed, as I watched it, it seemed like there was an airplane flying over the city of New York. My first thought was that this was another case of an airline pilot being irresponsible. I noticed that the airplane was flying over the city, heading towards the Twin Towers. I quickly shifted mentally into denial. As I watched the airplanes hit the trade towers, it felt as if I was watching some Hollywood-produced movie. The news provided us with the information that other planes were hijacked as well. I could not believe that this was actually happening to the people of New York, Pennsylvania, D.C., and the individuals that had boarded the flights that morning. I could not believe that this was happening in America or to America. It would take me days and weeks to fully process what occurred on September 11th. Most of us will forever remember that day, where we were when we learned of the attacks, how we felt, and what we thought, and what were our reactions. The attack of 9/11 did destroy buildings and kill thousands of innocent people. The attacks also interrupted the nation's routines and tugged at our fabric, our social fabric, not just in New York, Washington, D.C., and Shanksville, Pennsylvania, but across the country as well. Even those of us who did not know anyone who died that day have been touched by the tragedy. I had an opportunity to visit New York in 2006. As I was planning my trip, I made a list of the things I wanted to do and see. I listed Ground Zero, which was formerly the Trade Center, as one of those sites. When time came to go down, I couldn't go. New York was my birthday gift to myself, and I wanted the trip to be joyful and full of wonderful and good memories. I knew if I went, I would share tears of sorrow and my emotions would get the best of me. As I explored the other parts of the city, one very important thing always stuck out in my mind. New Yorkers were very proud, tough, and brave people. The city and young people today grew up in the shadow of 9/11. This event may have influenced some of you in the way you cope with what occurred. It may have had influence on your social, political attitudes and your overall beliefs of the world. How you view a race, cultures that are not like yours, and people in general that may fit certain stereotypes. What the news reported was that the individuals responsible for the attacks were Muslims, representing a group of terrorists, Al-Qaeda. There were some social consequences of the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks that were negative and continue to be, like the discrimination against individuals of Middle Eastern descent. A decade later, we still choose to stereotype all Muslims. So, now the question is, what can we do to move forward? To start, we must always honor the victims of violence and their loved ones. We must reach out to those who are in need, speak out for those who have no voice, educate ourselves and others, maintain civility and harmony in society and in the world, unite in hope, work for peace, and prevent another 9/11 from happening anywhere. I would like to express that while we spoke about the stereotyping of Muslims, this information also applies to anyone or group of people who does not belong to the mainstream. As you move forward in your education and in your lives, be encouraged to align with others that are different. Celebrate those differences and continue to embrace your similarities. Let us always remember those that were casualties of the attacks and those that laid down their own lives that day for the safety and protection of others. Let us always remember them. As we move forward, we must remember the mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters of the victims. We must remember the medical rescue teams, the firefighters, the law enforcers. We must remember all ethnicities, because as I've come to learn through the Center for the Healing of Racism and understanding about this thing, this invention called race, we are all a mixture of something other than what the eye thinks it clearly sees. We must all learn and embrace oneness. We must see each other as individuals, see each other for who we are, and not accept the stereotypes that we are taught in our homes, bombarded with in the media, and passed down to us generation after generation. We must be brave enough to authentically connect with those that are different from us. In closing, I would like to say, on behalf of the Center for the Healing of Racism, we would like to thank Terry Adcock of the Social Work Department and the University of Houston downtown for inviting us to be a part of this event. We would also like to thank you, the students, for giving us your ear and your time. I thank you.